Good evening. We're continuing in our lecture series, lecture 7, except this is going to be part 2, and it's going to be a little aside from the teaching of going out of body. I'm inserting this because something happened while I was beginning these journeys to Zeljko. I needed to be reconstructed mentally, and I had to go through a catharsis in order for that to happen. So I'm going to explain that catharsis as part 2 of lecture 7, and it goes like this. I was in a field, a giant field, and it looked like wheat was growing about 4 feet high, something like that. And it was kind of a circular field, but it was covered around with trees, so you couldn't penetrate through any of those trees. You had to go through the field. So I started walking towards the field. And I got on the field, and I could hear the field sounded like it was trying to speak, or it was speaking. I could hear voices, but they were so faint that I couldn't make out what they were. I would touch the top of these plants. They weren't wheat exactly, they were something else, but I would touch the top of them, and I could hear some sort of voices, like they were souls or beings or something. Well, anyway, it took me quite a long time to transverse this field, but I crossed the field and I came to a barrier of trees, these giant trees that were gnarled together. Their roots were intertwined. I had a heck of a time getting through the trees. But I finally made it to the other side of the trees. And when I got there, it was very dark. And I wasn't sure where to go next. But I saw a path, so I thought, all right, I'll take the path. Now it was dark, so I was having trouble staying on the path and not getting off, but I was able to transverse it pretty well. And then out of my peripheral vision, I could see red eyes, and they were all over the place. They were to my right and to my left, and right in front of me, but some distance away. And I began to get extremely nervous about what those red eyes were. And because I'd been seeing red eyes ever since I was a child, I think I've explained that before. So I kept on the path, but I began to get really nervous. My face got really tense. My hands were shaking, and I didn't know why. I mean, I was just seeing the red eyes, and I'd seen red eyes before. It wasn't like that this is something new, but my face had this tenseness to it. In fact, my head was sort of dizzy, and I couldn't concentrate directly. And then all of a sudden, I saw something moving in the shadows, and there were a lot of them. And I couldn't make out what they were, but they were coming my direction, and I needed to find out what they were and see if I had a defense against any advancement if they were going to attack me. Now, maybe they weren't. Maybe that wasn't their intention, but my body was screaming defense. So intellectually and intuitively, I knew that these things were going to try to harm me. And all of a sudden, they came right out of the dark, and they were giant wolf-like creatures. They weren't wolves because they were like 3 times the size of wolves. They had huge fangs, long claws. They were on 4 legs, and they had a tail like a wolf, but they were like twice the size or 3 times the size of a wolf. And they came right at me, and they attacked me, and I fought them off as best I could. I threw one, I tried to throw one at the other. There were so many of them that I couldn't control how many were attacking at once. And then all of a sudden, one of them tore my throat out, and another one tore my heart out and my chest out, and one of them crushed my skull, and I was virtually destroyed and eaten by these creatures, whatever they were. And it was dark. Everything was dark. My ego had been eaten by the wolves of the forest, as I called them. And then long out in the distance, I could see a little tiny light. Now, I couldn't see with my eyes because I didn't have eyes. I didn't have a body. I didn't have anything. So I was seeing this metaphysically. There was a little dot, and the dot kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden, I could see metaphysically that it was a shaman who was coming for me. And he began to reconstruct me. First, he built a skeleton, my skeleton. Then he built the muscles and the organs and the hands and the heart and the lungs, and he completely reconstructed me, and then he gave me this new consciousness that I needed in order to transverse the lessons on Zeljko. I think that was the lesson that this was about, for me to let go of the past and to be available for future lessons on Zeljko. Anyway, he finished his work, and he turned and he looked at me. He was a very old man, and he had a long beard, and he had a white cloak on, and he had this staff with a candle on it, or it was burning at least, like a torch. And he turned and walked into the dark and then just disappeared. And I found myself at home, sitting at my desk. Now, when this had started, I was not at home. I was traveling to an appointment. And now I was sitting at my desk, and all day had passed, and there I was. Another day had gone, and I didn't remember the day at all. I didn't know what was happening, and I found myself working in my journal at my desk. So I started to make a record of the event, writing down the path, the red eyes, the wolf creatures, the reconstruction by the shaman, all of it. And I felt my body just expand. It sort of expanded into light. It just kept expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding. And I was no more again. I was just pure thought and no matter. Pure consciousness and no matter. I had no idea how long that went on. Maybe 3 or 4 hours, something like that. And when I came out of that, I was sitting in my now famous red chair. It used to be in my study, and I used to do a lot of metaphysical activities in that red chair. I woke up out of oblivion in the red chair, but my body was still glowing in this white stuff. I don't even know a name for it. I couldn't even name it. everything was glowing and I was glowing. But I felt like I had been transformed. I had been transfixed, that I had been renewed, that I had been healed of something that was blocking my ability to go forward on the path that I needed to go forward on, and in the lessons at Zeljko. And if I hadn't made these changes, that I would have failed, and I wouldn't have been successful in what I'm going to tell you in the next lecture, which will be a couple of things that happen on Zeljko. But I wanted to tell you that it was necessary for the destruction of my resistance by these wolves of the forest in order for me to go forward, or I never could have gone to the next step on Zeljko or anywhere else. I would have been stuck on that path that I talked about before, where people go backwards or stay still. So that's tonight's lesson in part 2 of lecture 7. And next time we'll go back to Zeljko and I'll talk a little bit more about experiences there. So good night and blessings to you.